Well, thank you so very much. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Senator Allen, Assemblymember Chu, and the other committee members for having the opportunity to speak with you today. Also, to the distinguished panel, thank you for that. And I kind of feel a little bit of responsibility. Vito said he's a colonel, so I feel a little bit of responsibility to, as a senior guy here, to kind of recognize all the other veterans in the audience and say to them, thank them for their services and what they've given so much, as well as their family members. So I come to the discussion today, if you permit me, kind of like, so what is the why? Oftentimes when I'm in these audiences, people look at me and say, why are you here? You know, what are you doing? Why do you bring this voice?
Well, I think you're doing great.
And I think that it comes out of the idea that there really is no connection between the arts and the military. And so maybe through my comments today, I'd like to maybe dispel that a little bit, but also share where I think it's not true, but where there's a greater opportunity for that. But as stated, my name is Nolen Bivens. I spent 32 years on active duty. And I come to this conversation from the perspective of how I transitioned when I actually came into the military. I came into the military at the post-Vietnam time. And over those 32 years, I've had the opportunity to see a drastic change in the relationship between the military and the community in general, but also the arts, I think, in specific. So what I would like to do is frame my comments on these occasions mostly around the idea of this being a community discussion. And the reason I do that is because the local communities around our military bases are truly the homes of our service members and their families. As you perhaps know, 80% of military service members live in the actual community. They do not live on the bases. And that's a very important point when we establish this notion of community and community discussion. But here's the real bottom line I think I'd like to share with you today is I believe the arts and the military communities have a great opportunity to serve each other as never before, and even grow stronger arts and military communities. That's my passion, and even stronger arts and military community in service to each other. Now, I'd like to open the comments with a little bit of poetry, and it probably will dispose to you my bias for the arts, but I do it in order to create a metaphor for my discussion. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. These are the words by Robert Frost we all readily recognize, but I offer a slight twist on these words to create a metaphor for what's happening between the arts and military community in our local communities as well. Instead of diverging, I think the roads of the arts and the military communities are converging within our community. And if the arts and military community seize this moment, we can make all the difference. It's a topic that many of us, upon hearing, might consider is very unrelated, as I stated earlier. But the truth of the matter is that there's been a long history between the arts and military. The long winter of 1777 and 1778, when the Continental Army spent encamped at Valley Forge, was interrupted by a presentation of the play Cato, commissioned by George Washington himself for the troops. Then there's the great ghost army of World War II, a fact of military secrecy until its declassification in 1976. Specifically, the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops was an elite force whose specialty was tactical deception. Known as the Ghost Army, a troop of soldiers doubled in Europe's theater as a troupe of actors. They created inflatable tanks to deceive German military, and it too is an example of how the Allies embraced this artistry of the art. I think we are now at a moment where the two communities can again serve each other, albeit this time on the home front. The operative question one might ask is, how do we get to this point? How did the arts and the military get to a point where they can find value in service together? Well, let's deal with the first one. What brings the military to this point of convergence? I think it's a tremendous set of challenges and demands before them. Since 2001, more than 2.7 million U.S. troops have deployed. They've seen a historic and unprecedented number of multiple deployments. They've experienced shortened time at home between the deployments. More are returning home with physical, mental, and moral injuries. 22 million veterans are in the U.S. today, and over 1% of that is of our population. 850,000 of them are Vietnam veterans. Then there's the family side of the story. There are 1.2 million children of active duty military service members. The average military child will move 10 times during their parents' career. 80% of military families live off the military installation in the civilian communities, and I think that's a positive, by the way. Nearly 2 million children have experienced a parent deployment since 2001. Deployments average 8 months as represented as repeated intervals, often with dual family member head households. This operational tempo and the residual of 15 years of near continuous combat has put a stress on the force as never seen before, and it's left many with invisible wounds of war. Invisible wounds like PTSD, TBI, for which many do not seek treatment for fear of negative stigma. But even in the face of this, our troops are experiencing and expressing the value of the arts in helping them heal and cope with the 21st century demands of being brought upon them and their families. The arts, in my opinion, offer a non-stigmatized environment where veterans can choose their own method of healing and can go and deal with and create what I call post-traumatic strength. And that's an important point, because veterans do not want to be seen as victims. They want to be seen as strong and capable. So I just twisted the word because I've conversated with them and I realized that what they're really seeking is post-traumatic strength. Now, how did the arts get to this point of convergence? Historically, as any art historian in the room would tell you, the big art evolution covers the Neolithic and Hellenistic periods, the Renaissance, and also contemporary art period of expression. But the practical results of the arts' big evolution is that the arts have progressed to a point that within the military community, artistic expression is being utilized as a tool to heal, build, and sustain resiliency. In advocating for the value of the arts, the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies lists 5 essential arguments for the arts. The first one is the arts enrich the American economy. That's the old economic argument for the arts. The arts offer solutions for rural America. The arts offer cost-effective health treatment that works, and you'll hear a lot about that today in some of the programs. The arts improve education. That's the education argument. And finally, they say that the arts offer a net gain for the government. And if number 5 is true, and I think it is, I believe the arts community can now add a 6th value of the arts. I call it the arts offer benefits to national security. It can be a tool to enable healing, building, and sustaining the readiness and the resiliency of the force. And that gets that readiness. So that's why I'm kind of at the table. I'm an old operational guy. And I had an experience that showed me that potentially I would be carrying veterans, service members back into war that had not totally healed because they had invisible wounds. And that's when I became engaged in this, because that was a very meaningful part for me. This is a moment in time, as I shared with you earlier, where I think the arts offer solutions to the challenges our service members face, and by extension, the security of our nation. But this, as I stated in my opening comment, is a community discussion. And the value of the program supporting veterans and arts, healing lives through creative expressions, is not limited to the military portion of our community. That's just the tip of the iceberg of community psychological and emotional healing that the arts can support. Here is where in many of my talks on this subject, I normally ask the audience, what does the Battle of Fallujah, Fort Lauderdale Airport, Sandy Hook Elementary School, and the Boston Marathon tell us about the current reality of our communities? In one word answer, trauma. Our communities are awash in trauma, just like our service members experienced in the Battle of Fallujah. And there are no signs of it letting up. Just think of this. Of the 12 largest mass shootings in America, 7 of them have occurred since the Battle of Fallujah occurred. The military is still faced with balancing the high operational tempo with increased training. This load often falls disproportionately on state, National Guardsmen, and reservists. And here's another key point. Within our community, loneliness is projected to be the next health crisis. The arts offer solutions to both the military and civilian components of our communities. I'd like to highlight a few efforts that are contributing to this solution and proudly support those that the State of California Arts Council is pursuing that is making a difference. You see, I recently participated in the California Arts Council summit that was held in San Diego for the Creative Forces Initiative. I learned of veterans here in California who stated the arts saved their lives. So what are some of those initiatives? The first one is the National Initiative for Arts and Health in the Military, which seeks to advance the arts in health, healing, and healthcare for military service members, veterans, and their families. And then, as Vito indicated, the Veterans Administration Arts and Humanities has a pilot project that's evaluating the effectiveness of these outcomes. They're focusing on creative art therapies and art partnerships in patient-centered care planning. They're also mapping out local arts resources at each site. And I mention these because I think they offer patterns for many of the states. And the next one, the National Endowment for the Arts Creative Forces Initiative, is a unique partnership between DOD and NEA. And believe me, when you can get DOD and NEA in the room to agree, you've got a good thing going. But I think it also represents a model and pattern for a lot of state organizations who may want to pursue it. This initiative was launched by NEA and DOD in 2011 at many of the National Intrepid Centers of Excellence, particularly Walter Reed's that's located in Bethesda. And now it has expanded to 7 different locations, and I'm proud to say one of them is here in California with San Diego. It extends therapeutic art engagements into the community of patients. One of the things we realize and recognize is that 50% of the veterans who need treatment don't ever get the treatment. And they don't get into the medical world and the psychological treatment because of the stigma associated with it. I think the arts create that avenue and method, an alternative where they can seek that treatment on their own and not have to deal with that stigma. That's what makes the partnership between NEA, DOD, state and local arts agencies, and Americans for the Arts, who serves as administrator for the project. And finally, I just want to highlight the National Lieutenant Governors Association's partnership, which is a state military and veterans art initiative, also supported by Americans for the Arts. There are 3 goals associated with this initiative that I'd like to highlight. Policy development, which is an effort to have each and every lieutenant governor participate in a meaningful way, but also allow the National Governors Association to work with each lieutenant governor to encourage them to participate as well. There's also a research component to that provides strategies to encourage budget allocation support. There's a leadership development goal to it, and that goal seeks to identify elected and appointed officials in each of the states and territories to champion this work and advance the interests of state military and veteran affairs initiative. And the third objective and goal of this is to develop resources that are relevant and useful for local arts groups, elected and appointed officials to use to justify and promote the state military and veterans arts initiative. The National Lieutenant Governors Association and Americans for the Arts would produce various publications to publish electronically and print highlights, materials, and the successes on how elected officials can participate in this. So let me conclude where I started. Thank you, Senator Allen, Vice Chairman Chu, and all of the other Assembly members and legislators, and the California Arts Councils for the opportunity to participate in this vital and essential community conversation. And it is just that. A community discussion about veterans and the arts, healing lives through creative expression.